One of my favorite leadership observations is this: the leader is often the thermostat, not the thermometer. Think about what that says. A thermometer simply reflects the temperature in the room, while a thermostat influences it. Anyone can reflect chaos, anyone can mirror outrage, and anyone can amplify fear. Leadership asks us to do something harder, to create stability when instability exists, to create clarity when confusion exists, to create perspective when emotions are running high. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons so many people are struggling right now. We've become incredibly good at identifying problems, incredibly good at calling things out and criticizing. But leadership requires more than identifying what's wrong. If you're a CEO, entrepreneur, or business owner that can't seem to figure out what is blocking you from attaining the next level of growth in your business, then listen up. I'm Maria De Laurentiis Reyes. I've taken what I've learned in 30 years working inside multi-million-dollar corporations, building my own business, and consulting my clients, and discovered 5 themes that stop a business from scaling. I've created a tool to help you get the answers you need to get unstuck and unlock the next level of growth. Head over to scale.mariadr.com and click the link to get your custom Scale Factor Formula scorecard when this episode is over. Hey everybody, welcome to Finding the Upside. I'm your host, Maria De Laurentiis Reyes, and today I want to talk about something that seems to be everywhere: outrage. Not disagreement, not passion, not advocacy, outrage. Because if you spent more than 10 minutes on social media, watched the news, attended a public meeting, or frankly just existed in the world lately, you've probably noticed something. Everybody seems angry. Everybody seems certain. Everybody seems ready for a fight. And while some of that anger is understandable, I get it. Some of it is justified, and some of it is rooted in very real concerns. I think we've reached a point where we need to ask an important question. Is outrage actually helping us lead? Or is it simply helping us react? Because those are very different things. And one of the biggest leadership challenges of our time is learning how to tell the difference. Now, let me be clear before we go any further. This is not an episode about being passive. It's not an episode about staying quiet. It's not an episode about avoiding difficult conversations. In fact, if you've listened to this series, you know I've spent multiple episodes talking about courage, speaking up, living your values, and refusing to stay silent when something matters. This is not about silence, but it's about effectiveness. Because outrage and leadership are not the same thing. Passion and leadership are not the same thing. Reaction and leadership are not the same thing. And somewhere along the way, we've started confusing them. One of the things that I find fascinating is that outrage feels productive. Have you noticed that? When we're angry, it feels like we're doing something. We're posting, commenting, sharing, arguing, reacting. We're emotionally engaged. And emotionally engaged feels active. But activity and impact are not the same thing. And leadership isn't measured by how loudly we react. It's measured by what we create, what we influence, what we improve, what we move forward. This is something that I've been working on, because when you are trying to advocate and when you are trying to impact and influence, you really have to be very thoughtful and measured. And if you stay in that outrage, you stay in that anger, you can't. I think about this a lot because we're living really in an outrage economy. And yeah, I said economy. Why? Because outrage has become profitable. It drives clicks. You've got Megyn Kelly screaming on the top of her lungs. You've got various leaders and people in media that are making their mark by screaming at the camera. And it drives views, it drives engagement, it drives advertising revenue. It keeps people watching, it keeps people scrolling, and it keeps people emotionally activated. And the algorithms know that. Negative emotions spread faster than positive ones, unfortunately. Research has shown that content triggering anger often receives more engagement than content inspiring reflection. Why is that? Because anger is activating. It compels us to respond, to react, to participate. And that's exactly why outrage has become such a valuable commodity. The challenge is that what's profitable for platforms isn't healthy for people, or organizations, or communities, or democracies, because outrage narrows our focus. When people are angry, they tend to see the world in simpler terms: us versus them, right versus wrong, good versus evil. And while reality sometimes contains clear moral distinctions, most leadership challenges are more complicated than that. Most organizational challenges are more complicated than that. And most human beings are more complicated than that. One of the reasons I believe leadership is becoming harder is because leaders are increasingly expected to navigate environments filled with emotional intensity. Employees are bringing anxiety to work. I just did an episode a couple of weeks ago that talked about your employees not being okay. There's a lot happening. Customers bring frustration. Communities are bringing polarization. There's daily anxiety and stress that is in the air and in our environments. Families are stressed, and leaders are standing in the middle of all of it. And the temptation is to react, to mirror the intensity, to match the outrage. But leadership requires something different. Leadership requires emotional steadiness, requires us to not take the bait and lead from a sense and a place of calm and steadiness. One of my favorite leadership observations is this: the leader is often the thermostat, not the thermometer. Think about what that says. A thermometer simply reflects the temperature in the room, while a thermostat influences it. Anyone can reflect chaos, anyone can mirror outrage, and anyone can amplify fear. Leadership asks us to do something harder, to create stability when instability exists, to create clarity when confusion exists, to create perspective when emotions are running high. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons so many people are struggling right now. We've become incredibly good at identifying problems, incredibly good at calling things out and criticizing. But leadership requires more than identifying what's wrong. We have leaders running this country that are constantly pointing out what's wrong, but not solving it. It requires help creating what's next. That's a different skill. I see this in organizations all the time. An employee identifies a problem. Good, that's important. A leader identifies a problem. Also important. But leadership begins when somebody asks, what do we do about it? How do we improve it? How do we move forward? How do we bring people together around the solution? Because criticism alone doesn't create change. Action does. And by the way, without naming names, there's one leader that's running a city that's doing that. Now, let me say something that may make some people uncomfortable. Being angry about something does not automatically mean you're leading. And I say that because I think we've accidentally elevated outrage into a form of virtue, as if the intensity of our emotions is proof of our commitment. But history suggests something different. The people who create lasting change are rarely the people who stay angry the longest. They're the people who stay committed the longest. And there's a difference. Anger can start a movement, but it usually can't sustain one. Purpose sustains it. Vision sustains it. Discipline sustains it. Leadership sustains it. I think about some of the social movements that have changed our world: civil rights, women's rights, labor movements, disability advocacy, marriage equality, justice movements. Those movements absolutely contained anger, and rightly so. But they also contained strategy, organization, discipline, coalition building, vision, leadership. They weren't powered by outrage alone. They were powered by purpose, and that's an important distinction. Some of the things that concern me about our current environment is that outrage often creates the illusion of participation. Posting feels like action, commenting feels like action, sharing feels like action. And sometimes it is, that does help. Sometimes awareness matters, sometimes visibility matters, but leadership eventually asks us for more. It asks, what are you building? What are you improving? Who are you helping? And what responsibility are you taking? How are you contributing? Those are the leadership questions to be asking. This is especially important when we talk about diversity, inclusion, belonging, and justice, because these issues matter deeply. Outrage alone does not create belonging. Belonging is built through relationships, through trust, listening, policy, accountability, and courage, and through sustained effort. The work is harder than outrage, but it's also more effective. I often tell leaders that emotional intelligence, it has become one of the most important leadership skills of our time, and it's often the one that's missing because we're surrounded by emotional contagion. Fear spreads, anxiety spreads, outrage spreads, but so does calm, hope, perspective, compassion, curiosity. The question is what we're choosing to spread. And honestly, I think one of the most courageous things a leader can do right now is refuse to become emotionally hijacked by every headline. Not because they don't care, because they care enough to remain effective. Because reacting and responding are different things. Reacting is immediate, responding is intentional. Reacting is emotional, responding is thoughtful. Reacting follows the moment, responding helps shape it. I think this applies to all of us, though, not just leaders. I've said this so many times. You don't have to have the position of leadership to be a leader. Every day we're deciding what kind of energy we are contributing to the world. Are we amplifying outrage? Are we amplifying division? Or are we amplifying understanding, solutions, connection, possibility? That doesn't mean ignoring problems. It means engaging them differently. One of the reasons I started finding the upside was because I believed there was already enough outrage in the world. And what we needed was perspective, not blind optimism, not denial, not perspective, but the ability to acknowledge what's difficult while still searching for possibility, while flipping things around that look negative and find a way forward. Because outrage tells us what's broken. Leadership helps build what's next. So, what's the upside? The upside is that we don't have to choose between caring deeply and leading effectively. The upside is that passion and purpose can coexist. The upside is that while outrage may be loud, leadership is powerful. And the upside is that every one of us has the opportunity to move beyond reaction and into contribution. Because the future won't be built by people who are the loudest. It will be built by the people who stay committed to creating something better. If today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who believes leadership is about more than reaction. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, leave a review, and help us bring more people into these conversations. Because the world doesn't need more outrage. It needs more leaders. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Until next time, stay grounded, stay purposeful, and keep finding the upside. All right, so I hope you loved this episode and found it valuable. Thanks for hanging out with me. And if you'd be so kind, if you know someone else that this will help, please share this episode with them. Just grab a link for this specific episode, text it to a friend or colleague so it can help more people like you. Thanks so much for tuning in. I will see you next time for more entrepreneurial goodness. Same time, same place on the Finding the Upside podcast.